She would tell you, I'm sure, that it was, I mean, I know, we've talked about this a million times, how utterly painful it was for her siblings who had always looked up to her as the oldest, now disparaged her in many ways. They disrespected her. They shunned her in many ways. I did everything I could to keep the family, together, but she was the other them. She was the scary one, and so it was, Kathleen, if you want to add anything.
I mean, that's what it was. You're inside your own family, just sitting outside of it. You're not included. There'd be, conversations that the family was having. That I'd walk in the room and it wasn't ever included anymore. My husband wasn't a member, so we, my family still gets together and just doesn't invite us. And we are invited to some things, but there's other things that they do. They have a language that they speak that, my husband doesn't even understand, so.
And Mormons, when they get together, they just incessantly talk about their church jobs and the church and missionary work, and they're so clueless about politics for the most part, and you can't even talk about that. They're all conservative Republicans, for the most part. Didn't used to be that way. Years ago in Utah, there were a lot of Democrats. In fact, some of the leaders of the church were. But as time has gone on, the church has gotten. The Mormon church was, a wild, hairy, odd thing. It was not a mainstream thing when it was originated. But over the years, they have strived very hard to become more mainstream all the time.
I wanted to share with you.
Excuse me.
I'm right here.
All right.
Go ahead, John.
It's our turn or not?
It's your turn.
I had heard that there was a communal side to the church where members were required to put in so many hours at factories and so forth. Is there any truth to that?
There are things that go on as far as doing charity work and so forth. The church has a huge welfare system, and then incorporated into that in some areas are farms and manufacturing and so forth to produce the goods that are in the storehouse that they do give to people in need. There used to be a huge farm here in the Portland area, a bean farm. I grew up in my youth going out there and picking beans all the time and going out there and stringing the beans. It was all done for the church because all the stuff that was grown there then went to the bishop's, what they call the bishop's storehouse. And it's canned and so there is a lot of that, but there isn't anywhere near enough charity work outside the church as other churches.
How do the right-wing leaders feel about that?
About doing work outside the church?
Like being communist on one side and the other right-wing leaders.
Oh, don't even want me to go there. One of our past prophets was a huge John Bircher, and Ezra Taft Benson was actually Secretary of Agriculture under Eisenhower for 8 years. Again, kind of a split. I don't know how he did what he did sometimes, but anyway, there was another question here.
Got about 8 minutes max.
Okay.
So just ask questions, don't give a little speech.
I'd like to share with the group that some years ago when I was in Salt Lake City taking a doll seminar, back when we used to make art dolls, I did a tour of the headquarters. And so if any of you are in Salt Lake, I really suggest you do this because it is such an eye-opener, and the beautiful film that they have made about the history of the Mormon church is absolutely amazing. It's such a propaganda tool.
And it's a lie, so.
Yeah. For the most part, I will tell you that the story and the history that most people know about Mormonism is just a facade. I'm not in charge of mine, so. Okay.
Yes, since you were a descendant of Brigham Young, was there more pressures on you and your family to keep up tradition?
I believe there was, and I think that was one of the things that was hardest for me is because I was told all the time, remember the sacrifices your ancestors made. It's a huge, huge hammer if you have that heritage. And that my great-great-grandfather was the prophet, and his son married the daughter of an apostle. You know, I mean, I just grew up, and there was a Mormon royalty, and my family was part of that royalty. Now, my dad didn't teach me that I was, you know, above anybody because of that, but it was special. Very, and it's very, very powerful.
I think you have a very appreciative audience, and you mentioned that you have a lot more that you would like to say, and I would encourage you to perhaps come back on another occasion and present more information.
Yes. There is a lot. There's just so many interesting things. It's amazing.
Next year.
As a, how do you recommend we deal with Mormons? I mean, should I confront, in order to assist them in escaping this tragedy? Should we confront them directly and say this is absurd? Should be sympathetic? How do you recommend we effectively and genuinely help them?
You know, the best, us ex-Mormons say the best influence we can be is to live our lives with joy and happiness after we leave the church, and show them that there is a life after the church.